All right, we will get started. So good morning everyone and welcome to this webinar on NZQA Level 6 Procurement Training. My name is Emily Liddell and I'm the IPWEA Membership Engagement Manager. And this is the first webinar that I've organised, but we do have a series of thought leadership webinars. You can check out the details on our website. So while IPWEA has a multitude of different training courses on offer, both online digital badges, online courses, in-person training, as well as in-house training on offer, we don't have anything that is NZQA qualified for procurement. So that's where Caroline Boot comes in. So Caroline has 20 years of experience in tendering practices, and that's from the client and the supplier perspective. She's worked in New Zealand and internationally, so has a real depth of experience. She actually developed the Clever Buying Procurement training back in 2011 and became a qualified assessor through that. In 2016, there was a significant review to the training because of some changes to MB and NZTA requirements. So Caroline was determined to have a truly practical program which was applicable to all public sector procurement in New Zealand. And that's what she's come up with. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Caroline to give you some more detail. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks so much, Emily, for the introduction. That's fantastic. Nice to meet you all, and perhaps we'll do a quick round of introductions shortly. So, look, essentially, I'm here to tell you a little bit about this qualification. To be fair, I'm a bit of an evangelist on the qualification. We've worked on it over the last 10 years. We've tried to make it as practical, as accessible and as relevant as possible to New Zealand government public sector procurement professionals. So the program that we've developed supports the NZQA qualification. But before I go any further, I wonder if we could take a moment or two and just run through a few introductions. We've got several people on the call. And maybe if you could just quickly tell us who you are, what organisation you're from, and just in perhaps one sentence, tell us a little bit about your experience or involvement in procurement. So on the coast.
Yeah,
so look, over to me and I'll tell you a little bit about the structure of the qualification. First of all, there are 4 unit standards. It's been in common use. This qualification is not new. It's been around since 1992 or so, although it used to be very much focused on transport. It's mandatory for one person on the procurement team of waka kotahi procurements that are valued over 200,000. So certainly the waka kotahi audit team go around to make sure that there is somebody who is qualified with this qualification or its predecessors. There are about 400 people who are already qualified that are working across government, mainly local government and consultancies, so like Becker and some of the other consulting engineering companies. At the moment, there was a substantial review of the qualification back in 2014, between 2014 and 2016. And I was on the working group and was really looking at how do we, as Emily mentioned, how do we actually make this qualification more applicable, not just to transport projects with waka kotahi, but also how do we bring it together with the government procurement rules and processes that had recently emerged at that stage, and also bring it in line with international best practice. So the result is that this qualification is the only practical on-job qualification that's really specifically designed for people in your positions as public sector procurement people. There are other qualifications out there that are more theoretical, that perhaps involve more full-time study. This one is perfect for people who are actually in jobs and looking to get a qualification that is practical and rolls your sleeves up and involves the sort of thing that you do from day to day. The way we've structured the program is that essentially there's quite a lot of the program involves one-to-one coaching and mentoring. And I'll introduce you shortly to our team of qualified assessors, which is growing. But basically after you get started, you get assigned to an assessor and they work one-on-one. They'll give you written feedback. They'll be at the end of a phone if you need some advice on a procurement, and they also assess you largely, almost all remotely and via Teams or Zoom, and via professional discussions as well as written evidence. So a little bit about the structure of the qualification. 4 unit standards, and as I said, they're all about practical skills of procurement. So procurement planning, really important that procurements are well planned. Preparing RFTs, there's a unit standard on processing and evaluating tenders, and there's 1 unit standard on ethical and legal standards. That also builds in government procurement rules and a bit of New Zealand case law. So very relevant to your environment to make sure you can keep you and your council or your organisation out of court when it comes to procurement probity. The way we assess it is very much on job. So we have been running either tutorials or a 2-day course. We've defaulted to tutorials during lockdown, but we hope to run the 2-day courses again soon as we can get down to level 2. We observe students in that process and we get the first evidence needed for assessment during those processes. Then after the course, people hand in their course materials, their course workbooks and procurement plans, and they hook into 5 assignments. And they can be based on scenarios if you don't have, the initial ones can be based on scenarios if you don't have a workplace example at that time, or you can use workplace examples. They involve developing procurement plans, developing RFT or RFP documents and response templates, processing and evaluating tenders and reporting on that. And we also use professional discussions or interviews just to make sure that your work is your own and that you understand it at a very an in-depth level. The costs and funding, look, normally these are the costs that are involved in getting this qualification. So the 2-day course or the online alternative is $1,400. The assessment and coaching and mentoring, typically people go through the qualification at different speeds. Some need more input from their assessor, some need less, but there's a cap that is placed on the funding for that at $3,000. And then Connexus ITO, which is the organisation that manages the interface with NZQA, has some fees as well. The beauty of this is that at the moment and up until December 2022, which is in a year and a bit's time, basically all of that stuff, which equates to over $6,000, is funded by government. So it's an amazing opportunity to latch into that government funding. The program, just looking at the program, how it all works, basically we kick off with either online tutorials, as we have in the past few weeks, or a face-to-face 2-day course. Then there's the 5 assignments to work through. Notably, people like Bex have already done assignment 3, which is a desk-based assignment on government rules of procurement and ethical and legal situations. But you can either do assignment 3 or assignment 1 to kick off. And most people take between 6 and 18 months to get the qualification. That said, I've had some people qualify in 2 or 3 months, and I've had other people take longer, particularly if they've had a job change or something like that. So I'm going to just pause there and just see if there's any questions from you guys on the structure of the qualification.
Okay. Is there any deadline on completing the course, or can it take as long as you like?
Essentially, there is a bit of a deadline, but it's not imposed by us. Connexus, the infrastructure ITO, say, look, after 18 months or 2 years, we really want to see some progress. They also have a requirement that you get at least 1 unit standard per year, or 10 credits per year. All the unit standards are worth more than 10 credits. So essentially, the students that struggle are the ones that don't follow through reasonably regularly after the course and don't keep up momentum.
So the time commitment then can vary from person to person then? Is it?
Absolutely.
No sort of, yeah. So
it depends on how much coaching and how much support you need from your assessor. You get to know your assessor very well.
Okay.
So sorry, just to clarify, the 5 assignments that we have to do afterwards, those are the other unit standards, is that correct?
They cover the unit standards, yes. Okay. We need 2 assignments in order to cover unit standard 18927. So some students we need more. Generally we need two good examples. Some students might come up with an example that's doesn't quite meet the standard, might need a 3rd example of a procurement process. And in that case, obviously, they need to find that example, or in some cases, we can use a scenario to show procurement planning skills or preparing RFTs. We haven't quite learnt how to fake processing and evaluating tenders. So you need real examples for that, at least 2.
Okay, and sorry, just another question. Would you recommend waiting until I've done the 2-day course before I start on my next assignments, or just getting started on them and communicating with Steve?
No, let's get going.
Awesome.
We don't know how long lockdown's going to take, and we might as well use it as profitably as we can. We've got actually a tutorial on Friday, which Bex, you're working with Steve, I think, aren't you?
Yes.
So we're going to run a tutorial on the basics of procurement planning, so you can get started on that.
Awesome, thank you.
Sometimes people say, look, if I don't finish the qualification, will I have to pay the money back to the government? And actually the answer is no. We do expect you to get at least 1 unit standard, but at the moment there has been no requirement to pay anything back. And the way I figure it, that's a wonderful thing, because any training in procurement, even if you were to end up having to leave your job or having a change of circumstances that meant you couldn't finish, you've gained a great deal from getting the training so far. But of course, we're hoping that everybody will finish. So look, the next slide is really on the typical candidates. Look, most people are in some sort of middle or sometimes senior manager position. Some are relatively new to procurement as well. A lot of people are tertiary graduates, already have some kind of tertiary training. Age range, typically not straight out of school, but age range varies quite a bit. We've had younger people in that and older people in that sign up and successfully complete the qualification. I think my youngest graduate was 20. And she was amazing. She was an extremely capable young woman. Most people who do the qualification are employed in local government or waka kotahi, or increasingly government departments. We've got a few people actually from DHBs, ministries, or departments, and of course consultancies who work with all those organisations. One question we get asked is, if I'm not involved in infrastructure, is this qualification relevant for me? And absolutely it is. We've had graduates from the health sector, from education, defence, corrections, MSD, because all of those organisations are doing government procurement and the principles apply across the board. So we get some really interesting examples of procurement processes from IT, from one of the graduates in education did learning programs for refugees. It was fascinating, but all the principles applied, and she could demonstrate her skills in that case in an entirely different context. Generally, people have some experience in tendering or procurement, or they are leading into a role that will involve tendering and procurement. And I think that applied to you, Bex. If you're working into a new role on procurement, then this is good because we can start you off on working on scenarios. You get good coaching, and as you develop your skills, hopefully you'll also get more and more experience provided by your managers. We do say that certainly for the later parts of the program, you need to have personal involvement in practical procurement activity. So your managers need to be giving you opportunities to develop RFT documents, to get involved on tender evaluation teams. And indeed, some people have been doing this for years. So it's not a problem for them to have personal involvement in procurement activity. We do think that the most successful students have very strong management support. We ask people to commit to completing assignments every 3 months. Mostly the assignments only take half a day to maybe 2 days at max to do. So if you can do them on the job, that's fantastic. If your role or the timing just doesn't work out that you can't do them on the job, then you should expect to spend a little bit of time in your own time and weekends or evenings or outside business hours to at least get one assignment every 3 months. A little bit of background about our team. So we tend to be doing most of the heavy lifting on this qualification. Over the past 5 years, 95% and more of the graduates have gone through our program, partly because it's very structured and you get very strong support. You can do this qualification externally, and there are a few assessors who do it outside, who have 1 or 2 or a few students each. At the moment, we've got, I think, 410 students who are actually signed up, and in the next few weeks, we will have 70 more in the pipeline. So you're in good company. There are a lot of people who are now going through this qualification, and you'll see more and more of its influence pervading, I suppose, across public sector. We have a team of assessors. At the moment, there's 6 of us, and everybody is NZQA qualified as an assessor, as well as having the qualification. The structured program that we offer has some foundation reading. It has the training course, the 2-day course, or our substitute of tutorials during lockdown, the 5 structured assignments, which can be a mixture of scenarios and workplace examples, and that one-on-one coaching and mentoring and assessment is really good. So a little bit about our team. There's, as I mentioned, there's 6 of us assessors. So apart from me, I seem to be running the show most of the time. I do some assessments, but there's quite a a big amount of organisation of courses and so on at the moment. Many of you will also meet Steve. Steve is also facilitating courses. He or I generally facilitate the courses, and he's an assessor he's got over 100 students at the moment. You may also interface with Janina, who is our superb admin manager. She organises all the courses and the sign-ups, and is a great mainstay. And then our other assessors are Graham. Graham works for GHD. He's based in Dunedin, and he's been an assessor for about 6 months or so. We've got Rachel, who qualified actually under me. She was one of my first graduates when she worked for Waka Kotahi about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe longer. She's based in Tauranga. Bruce Buxton, who's Dunedin based, and is also, he's a independent consultant, and also Cindy Forsyth, who's based in New Plymouth, and she works for council, and she's been an assessor for about 6 months. We also have 3 more assessors who are about to join us. They just have to tick the box with Connexus to get approval. And they're all working for council. So one's working for Queenstown Lakes, one is working for Selwyn District Council, and one is working for Dunedin City Council. And all of those people will do a little bit of assessment alongside their day jobs, mostly outside hours. And it also adds huge benefit to their councils because they get to see what other councils are doing through assessing the qualification. So how does the assessment process work? So we've got a kind of blow by blow. How does it all pan out for you? What do you need to do? Essentially, first of all, you sign up, and there's a two-pronged sign-up process. So you sign up, you register with us, and there are links on our website, a form to fill in with some commitments that you make. So commitments, for example, to make sure that you consult with your manager and you're going to be involved in procurement activity. Connexus also have a training agreement that needs to be filled in by you and your manager, and some perhaps slightly more formal commitments. They have a screening process just to make sure that the students who come into this qualification are not just after the free government money, but also suitable to go through and complete the qualification. As soon as you're signed up and you're issued with a training plan, that means you're registered with NZQA, and we can send out the first couple of assignments. You can do the assignment 3 first, just as Bex has done, or you can hook into assignment 1. Either way depends on what you've got on at the time. Usually at that point we attend the student attends the 2-day Clever Buying course, but there's nothing stopping you from doing the first assignment before the course. After the course, we ask you to reinforce the course materials and finish off some of the exercises introduced on the course. That takes only an hour or 2, and we expect that within a couple of weeks, 2 weeks to a month after the course. Any students who leave it longer than that are in a bit of danger of forgetting what they learned. At that point, we assign you to one of our assessors. Ideally, if there are other people in your organisation doing the qualification, we try and keep you all with the same assessor when we can. And they become your coach and your sounding board and the person, your go-to person, if you've got any questions about procurement. So in a sense, it's kind of free consulting over that period. Those are our assessors. You've already met them. Assignment 1 is developing a procurement plan, and you can use a scenario which we'll give you. We hope that we expect that you'll make some runs on the board and get a draft to us within 2 months. It's about a day's work at the most, and we'll give you written feedback. Often that means that you'll make a few tweaks to it, And then when you're ready, when it's up to standard, we'll have a professional discussion with you. And that's a pretty relaxed conversation via Teams. That gives you the first unit standard 18926, which is worth 20 credits. So pretty accessible, that one. The second assignment is to develop an RFT based on that document usually. So normally you'll use that procurement plan, you've done the heavy lifting, and develop an RFT document. And again, we give you written feedback, and you might do some amendments to that to tick that off. And that's the first part of Unit Standard 18927, which is arguably the most difficult, because getting a good RFT out is critical to the whole procurement process. Assignment 3, that's the one that Bex and many others actually in the last 2 weeks have already done. So assignment 3 is on government procurement rules, ethics, New Zealand case law, and essentially most people take 3 or 4 hours. I'm interested, Bex, how long did it take you?
Yeah, it probably took me about 3 hours.
Yep. And the beauty of it is if you do your research well, that's 15 credits towards your qualification. Total is 80 credits, so that's a really good chunk. And you can do that anytime. You can do that right at the start, and you can do it even before you've attended the 2-day course. So I'm encouraging you guys, if you're keen to sign up to the qualification, access the funding, you could start tomorrow or today, in fact. Sign up and get a training plan in place, and we can get you started on that first assignment. Good thing to do in lockdown. Assignments 4 and 5 are where the rubber hits the road and you're really strutting your stuff at this stage. So assignment 4 is about developing a procurement plan and RFT documents, and generally people do that for a live project. We'll give you written feedback, some amendments, and a professional discussion finishes it off. But we do expect you to do assignments 4 and 5 to a reasonable standard without us having to do a lot of the work for you or your managers. So it needs to be pretty good by that stage, or we might need a second example. Assignment 5 is about processing and evaluating tenders, so Unit Standard 18928. And ideally you are participating in and ideally leading 2 tender evaluations, or at least one of those. You'll write up the reports. When we say leading, some involvement in making sure the scoring system is robust, making sure that your evaluators are properly briefed. We give you feedback on your evaluation report and a professional discussion. And that completes the last unit standard for 20 credits. So it's quite a structured program. Basically assignments 1, 2, and 3 you can do based on scenarios, and we give you a lot of feedback. We call it formative assessment. Assignments 4 and 5, we really need you to demonstrate your skills without too much input from your managers or from your assessor. Any questions about the assessment process?
If we are doing from the same organization and we sort of get the same codes, then with respect to those live projects, can it be done on the same project? Can 2 of us provide our assignment in the same project, but definitely working on our own, not like copying?
Such a good question, Dinesh. Thank you. Yes, definitely. In fact, the students that do really well often form study groups. We had a webinar for a study group of it was led by the crowd from Timaru, who did a group course about 18 months ago, but they brought in people from other councils around, and they were all kind of checking out how are they going on assignments. They can peer review each other's stuff. What we do ask is that you don't plagiarize somebody else's stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we have the professional discussions, we'll be digging into making sure that it is your own work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Any other questions about the process?
Just thinking about if somebody was doing an assignment and they had years of experience, could they dust off an old project or from something from a previous workplace to submit as an assignment?
That's a really good question too. And we often get asked that. The answer is technically yes, but often what they'll find is what they did a year or 2 or 3 ago or before they knew what they know now doesn't quite cut the mustard for the qualification. So we have a workaround for that, and as long as the gaps are not too huge, we can then ask the student to say, okay, so maybe it wasn't perfect, but you tell us what you would have done with what you know now. And that's a little bit of an extra piece, often just a page or two, to say, okay, here's what I would have done. I would have set up a much more robust scoring system, or I would have done a more robust briefing of my tender evaluators so that they all were on the same page when it came to evaluating the tenders. That kind of stuff helps us to have confidence that that student actually would change their behaviour going forward. So it is possible. It's not ideal. And it's much, much better to use a
You seem to be cutting in and out there.
You do from start.
I think
if you have one of those. Look,
I think we're having some
how's that?
technical issues there. Yes, I think I think we can hear you again.
Okay, I'll back up the track. So the course is very interactive. It's essentially a lot of fun. We do lots of group work, lots of paired work, lots of discussion. And I tell you what, we assessors, Steve and I, who facilitate the course, we learn something new every time. People come out of the course absolutely buzzing. We cover a bit of an introduction section. We hook into a scenario procurement planning exercise. That is on a project where you work on in pairs. We talk about the different supplier selection methods, and towards the end of the first day, you develop the bones of an RFT document. So we've done some of it for you, but you fill in the gaps and you complete it after the course. So that's the first day, which is very much on the front end of procurement. The second day, we focus on the back end of procurement, which is investigating, first of all, the scoring methods and some of the things that cause us grief when we're scoring tenders, some of the situations that can lead to a bit of a dilemma. We talk through the housekeeping or the evaluation processes that have to run for an efficient tendering process. We have typically middle or after lunch on the second day, we talk about a whole bunch of ethical and legal situations. We cover some New Zealand case law, and particularly some of the cases that have involved councils, and what lessons can we learn from them. And we talk about some of the most important government procurement rules that we need to be aware of. And then the last thing we do on the second day, which is the most fun of all, is we've got 2 examples of tender evaluations, one good, one bad, the bad one first and the good one later, and that brings the whole course, basically distills it, and the lights go on and we see the benefit of all of what we've learnt on the course. So the 2-day course is fun. It's definitely not death by PowerPoint. And look, let's hope that we're down to level 2 or level 1 and we can run some more of the 2-day courses. We will, if we need to, run these online. It's not as good as having a whole bunch of buzzy procurement people in the room with a bunch of different perspectives on procurement. But if we have to run it online, then we'll do the best we can so that we don't hold you up in continuing on your qualification. And we just have to watch and wait. So I thought I'd finish off by giving you a little bit of the comments we've had from trainees and graduates. And just the other day, I had a comment from Bruce Walton. His name is from Morrison Lowe. He'd handed in his first assignment and he made this comment saying, look, I'm so excited. It's a great opportunity to put my money where my mouth is and help clients and suppliers both win. And he was saying, look, it's really obvious there's so many great opportunities that are lost through poor procurement. How often projects go wrong because they're procured in the wrong way. So he's just starting out. He's done the initial tutorial and the first assignment, and he's absolutely fired up. I've got a comment from Kedar. That's your mate, Eric, who said, advice is if you want to broaden your procurement skills, learn proper ways to do things, this is the right course. Great study materials, good guidance through the course. Another comment from Nicola from Whangarei Council. She saw the benefit in the course, not just for her, but across her department, which was the water and wastewater area of Whangarei Council. She said it was challenging, but well worth the effort. And she said, look, everything is so much clearer. I still, even though she qualified about 4 years ago, I still have quite regular contact with her and her colleagues at Whangarei. Can you hear me okay? We all good? I just got a note saying my internet's unstable again. A little bit more comment from Pam, who now works for Otago Regional Council. She said, make sure you get your employer on board and you've got opportunities. I think she met a bit of a roadblock in not getting enough opportunities. So really important that your managers are supportive. Luca from Gisborne Council talked about how good the method of assessment was, being one-on-one, quick reviews, very quick feedback turnaround, and a mixture of coaching and video conferencing if they needed face-to-face contact. We had a comment from Pauline who's a graduate from Ministry of Education, and she was the first graduate from Ministry of Education, and she said, look, the content was really well aligned, which almost surprised me because they do things differently from a lot of sectors, but she found that the processes and methodologies were absolutely aligned to what she needed to do. And lastly, this comment from Sarah from Waka Kotahi or NZTA, she said, look, a watershed moment for both her team and for her personally. And she had the confidence then to do the right thing. She actually stood up to some of her bosses who had been doing procurement the same way since 1972. And it really opened up possibilities in terms of her career development. So that's a little bit of feedback from graduates and from trainees. So that's really the guts of what's involved in the qualification, and I'm keen to hear your questions or your feedback or thoughts about how suitable will this be for you and your colleagues.
Yeah, that's really informative. Thanks for that. Yeah, I guess you know, working at Becca, it's been useful bouncing you know, ideas and any questions off other colleagues. But I think it'd be great to and obviously there's been a lot of good feedback that I've received from colleagues that have gone through the course recently. But yeah, just great to get some other perspectives on you know, on the processes and you know, good practice, which is awesome.
It's funny actually, Jared, appreciate your comments, because I think when the qualification was reviewed 5 years ago or so, the working group really set out to unashamedly lift the bar in procurement. So we still get people who have been doing procurement for a very long time, who do it in very traditional ways, and perhaps we've moved on since then. And that's an interesting area to have some leading lights. I'm so pleased that government has funded this, so we'll have a whole cohort of people coming through with these skills, which are a step up from the legacy skills that used to be acceptable, but really we can do things better now. Any thoughts from others on the group? Feedback, comments, questions?
From myself again, it will be about, I think I'm trying to think of, I'm also doing engineering masters at the moment from University of Auckland, and procurement has been one of the topic that we study in program portfolio management and few of the papers, but it doesn't go into in depth. And I'm thinking it might be quite helpful if I introduce this to my colleague there as well. But just wondering, because we all are working full time, we're doing our masters, and also adding this onto our plate, will it be too much? Or, but I think based on what you have said earlier, looks like a lot of them can be done at work and doesn't even need our extra time. Any comments on that?
That's how we structure it, Denise. We try and make it so that the time you need to spend on things like studying textbooks, it's not really about that approach. So it will be different from your master's study in that there are no textbooks and exams. A lot of people ask about how does this qualification compare with the CIPS qualifications, the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply. And essentially the approach is very different and the content is very different. So CIPS certainly and the master's programs have their place as very academic programs that involve textbook study, probably a broader focus, to be fair. This is really New Zealand centric, so really applies to practical procurement in New Zealand. And we have some people who end up at the end of the qualification and they haven't needed to spend any time outside work. Some people spend more time outside work. Generally, those are the people who don't have a lot of support from their managers. So if you've got support from your managers to apply these methods to the procurements you're doing, it shouldn't be too onerous. Some of the methods that you'll learn too, suddenly the light goes on and you realize that it's going to save you time on your procurement processes.
Thank you, that's really good. So I think I'll forward the information to my colleague, but also here in West Coast, our procurement studies for the transport is joint AMP we usually prepare, and that has been in place since 2015. So I think it'll be a good idea to pass it on to them as well. And as you said, I think a lot of the opportunity to make a group study or group webinar or that option, which makes everyone encouraged. And so definitely a lot more confident on speaking on this course now. And I think I'll be forwarding it to a few more people and other councils, fellow councils here in West Coast, but also my fellow students. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, the more people that do this qualification, the more we will be able to get a consistent standard of procurement skill across New Zealand, across particularly in local government, but across New Zealand in general. Yeah, and that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, it's quite good. I mean, it's quite free, as you said, $6,000 worth of study for free, and also a very involved one, and the content looks very good, and yeah, quite excited. Thank you.
Great. Any comments from others?
Yeah, I think for Wellington Water, this course is pretty much spot on. I think many of my colleagues within the Wellington Water community would be interested in taking up this course. And I would probably want to circulate this slides if I can get it back later on. after the webinar. I'll probably circulate it within our organization and see if they've got to join this course.
Cool. One thing we can do, if you have basically a quorum of, if you're in a main centre, at least 8 people, or if you're in a provincial centre, at least 10 people, then we can basically run a course at your offices. There's a few things we ask you to cover, of course, and underwrite those first 8 people or 10 people, just to make sure that we don't end up with any no-shows. But that can be convenient. But what we tend to do then is we open the door to some externals so that you get that real cross-pollination of ideas and procurement, and the learning environment's really positive at that point. You gain from your colleagues as much as you gain work from other people outside your colleagues, as much as you gain from your colleagues. Some great ideas float around.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Yes, definitely. I'm also just wondering. I believe this is more concentrated into physical buy. I mean, does the standards or the teachings also enable us in procurement of intangible assets as well, like intangible procurements on the likes of softwares and things like that?
Absolutely. I'm just trying to bring some of the examples. I mentioned there was learning programs, seeking providers for learning programs in the education sector, marketing programs. That was a KiwiRail initiative. IT for police, I think it was. There was a whole IT rollout. So the context of the procurement is not critical at all. It's all about asking the right questions and putting together procurement tools that reflect appropriate risk and opportunity analysis and market analysis. The context isn't important.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Right. If there are no more questions, back to you, Emily.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Caroline. That's fascinating. It's enlightened me on the world of procurement, and I can only imagine with the government investment going on at the moment in public works across the board that procurement is a career that is just growing, and the expectation is that those qualifications and meticulously following process will become more and more important. So yeah, sounds like a really valuable training. I hope everybody got something from it as well. I'll just highlight some upcoming events. We've got a conference which has been moved to next year because of the lockdown. It was meant to be next week. And our next webinar is coming up on the 9th of September. That is about leveraging walking in New Zealand. So completely different topic, but maybe of interest to some of you out there. So I'd encourage you to jump on our website and see if there's anything else that tickles your fancy. And yeah, best of luck everyone for your level 3 or level 4 lockdown, and staying engaged as you can be when you're spending so much quality time with the screen. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much, Caroline.
I just have another question, Caroline. Does the candidate now has to be a resident or citizen of New Zealand for this particular course?
You just have to have the right to work in New Zealand. I've had that question from somebody. So you just have to be able to be employed in New Zealand, have a work permit or a working visa, and you're eligible.
Okay.
Which is good news.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So we'll get the slides and the recording out to everybody, but if you have any other questions, feel free to contact Caroline, or you can contact our training email and we'll get the questions to Caroline or whoever needs to answer them for you.
So thanks everybody. Hope you'll sign up, and love to have you on the qualification, you and your colleagues. And any questions, as Emily says, we're more than happy to answer, and let's see if we can make this work for you.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.